Mikhail Vrubel, the demon who painted his own soul. Part 1. Listen carefully. There was once an artist who painted so fiercely, so obsessively, that the lines between reality and madness began to dissolve before his very eyes. His name was Mikhail Vrubel, and they whispered, in hushed voices, that his art was not entirely his own. That perhaps, the visions came from somewhere else. A rumor spread in Moscow at the end of the 19th century: Vrubel does not paint as a man paints. He paints as if possessed. And indeed, when you look at his most famous work, The Demon Seated, you see not only a figure of tragic beauty, but also a self-portrait of a soul chained by invisible torment. But how did this young boy from Omsk, born in the frozen vastness of Siberia, become the painter of demons, the visionary who lived on the edge of heaven and hell? His story is a descent and a revelation. Childhood in Siberia. Mikhail Alexandrovich Vrubel was born in 1856, in the desolate town of Omsk, where the endless plains stretched out under skies of burning gold and purple. His father was a strict military officer, a man of order and discipline. His mother died when he was still a child, leaving in him an early wound, an emptiness that he would try to fill all his life with color, shape, and spirit. As a boy, Vrubel did not play as other boys did. While others swung sticks or chased through snow, he lingered in corners, sketching strange figures, angels, masks, and faces. Teachers would later say, he did not copy the world. He invented it anew, and it frightened us. Yet, as with many visionaries, his gift was also his burden. He lived between two realms, the outer world of his father's military routine, and the inner world of dreams, myths, and unearthly visions. The awakening of an artist. Vrubel's path to art was not immediate. He studied law in St. Petersburg, following the expectations of his family. But while law gave answers, Mikhail searched for mysteries. He roamed the cathedrals, staring at the mosaics of Byzantine saints, their solemn faces bathed in eternal stillness. He confessed later, "I felt them breathing in the stone." At the age of 24, he abandoned law and entered the Imperial Academy of Arts. There, his professors quickly realized they had not met a mere student but a force of nature. Vrubel would stay up all night, painting feverishly, as if afraid the vision would vanish before the morning light. His style was unlike anything Russia had seen, angular, crystalline, shimmering like stained glass. Some students laughed. They said his paintings looked broken, unfinished. But Vrubel pressed on, convinced that art must reveal the hidden geometry of the soul. First struggles and obsession with the demon. Then came his fateful encounter, the demon. In Russian poetry of the time, especially in the works of Lermontov, the demon was a tragic figure, not evil but exiled, yearning, beautiful, and damned. Vrubel became obsessed with this image. For years he would sketch, repaint, reimagine the demon, sometimes calm and majestic, sometimes writhing in anguish, sometimes proud and defiant. Those who saw his early sketches whispered, "It is as if he paints himself." Cinematic studio imagery. Picture this: a dim studio in Moscow. The smell of turpentine and candle wax fills the air. Canvases lean against every wall, fractured mosaics of angels, masks of sorrowful faces, shimmering wings, and always the demon. Mikhail himself stands in the middle, his eyes burning, his brush cutting the canvas like a dagger. He paints not carefully but violently, in sharp strokes, layer upon layer, until the figure emerges like a phantom from smoke. His hands are stained, his clothes torn, but he does not notice. The candle flickers. On the canvas, the demon's eyes seem alive, watching him. And thus begins the tale of Mikhail Vrubel, the man who saw beauty in ruin, who fought angels and demons on his canvases, and who, in the end, was consumed by the very visions he sought to capture. Part 2: Rise, Scandal, and the Grip of Madness. The year was 1884. The Imperial Academy of Arts, proud and rigid in its traditions, gave Vrubel his first great commission, to restore the ancient frescoes of the Kievan Church of St. Cyril. It was here that his vision first burst into the open. Instead of simply copying the old Byzantine style, Vrubel dared to reimagine it. His saints had haunting, angular faces, their robes shimmered with violet and emerald, their eyes carried sorrow rather than serenity. Parishioners would kneel to pray and whisper in fear, "These saints, they are too alive, too human, too tragic." Some accused him of sacrilege. Others were awestruck. But one thing was certain: Mikhail Vrubel had found his voice. The outsider in Moscow. After Kiev, Vrubel moved to Moscow. But Moscow's art world was no easy ground for him. The salons were filled with polished portraits of noblemen and decorative landscapes. Patrons wanted beauty, clarity, tradition. Vrubel brought them something else: fractured light, trembling forms, souls and torment. His works were rejected again and again. Critics sneered. One review called him a painter of broken glass. Another simply asked, "Is this man mad?" But there were a very few, who saw genius. The wealthy patron Sava Mamontov opened his doors to Vrubel, giving him commissions for theater sets, ceramics, even architectural decorations. In Mamontov's artistic circle, Vrubel found both refuge and fuel for his vision. The demon returns. Yet the demon never left him. In 1890 he unveiled his most infamous painting, The Demon Seated. Imagine the canvas. A figure sits alone in twilight. A body muscular yet fragile, bound in tension. Wings folded like broken glass. And eyes that burn with both pride and despair. The demon is neither angel nor devil, neither man nor beast. He is condemned to sit eternally between heaven and earth, longing for what he cannot touch. The public was horrified. Some turned away in disgust. Others could not look away, transfixed by the figure's melancholy beauty. A critic wrote, "This is not art. This is illness placed on canvas." But Vrubel himself, exhausted, said quietly, "It is me. It is always me." The studio of shadows. His studio in Moscow became legendary. Visitors described it as stepping into another world. Canvases leaned against walls like restless spirits. Shimmering angels, women with gemstone eyes, flowers that looked like they might bleed. Vrubel would work for days without sleep, muttering, sometimes breaking into wild laughter, sometimes collapsing in silence. One witness said, "He painted as though he were exorcising something from himself, but the more he painted, the deeper the demon took root." The opera in love. But in the midst of darkness came a glimmer of light. In 1896, Vrubel painted stage sets and designs for Rimsky-Korsakov's opera The Tale of Tsar Saltan. It was here he met Nadezhda Zabila, a brilliant opera singer with a voice like silver. Against all odds they fell in love. She saw in him not only the tortured artist but also the fragile man beneath, yearning for tenderness, for someone to believe in him. They married. And for a time there was joy. Vrubel painted portraits of her, draped in jewels and exotic fabrics, shimmering like visions. To him, she was both muse and salvation, the only angel who could keep the demons at bay. But art, and madness, would not release their hold so easily, foreshadowing the fall. Even as his fame grew in whispers, so did the whispers about his mind. He spoke often of visions, of figures appearing in his sleep. Sometimes he would stop mid-sentence, staring into empty space as though listening to something no one else could hear. When friends asked if he feared madness, Vrubel only smiled and said, "Madness? No. I fear silence." For in silence, the demon's voice was loudest. Part 3, The Peak of Fire and the Fracture of the Mind. At the dawn of the 20th century, Russia was trembling with change. Revolution whispered in the streets, new movements clashed in salons, and art itself was being reborn. And at the very heart of this storm stood Mikhail Vrubel, untamed, brilliant, and dangerously close to burning himself alive in the furnace of his own visions. The height of creation. In 1900, Paris glittered with the World Exhibition. Among the treasures from Russia was Vrubel's monumental panel, Princess of Dreams. Imagine it, a vast figure of a woman draped in cascading silks, her form dissolving into jeweled ornaments, her eyes half closed as if lost in a trance. The canvas shimmered like stained glass lit by hidden fire. The critics were bewildered. Some hailed it as a revelation, calling Vrubel Russia's answer to the symbolists. Others dismissed it as delirium. But one thing was clear: Vrubel was no longer merely a painter. He was a force dragging Russian art into a terrifying, dazzling future. The opera's vision. Back in Moscow, his collaborations with opera deepened. He designed magical backdrops for Rimsky-Korsakov's Sadko and the Snow Maiden. His sets glowed with colors that seemed alive: crimson skies, sapphire seas, forests of emerald flame. Audiences gasped as if transported into another realm. But those closest to Vrubel noticed something darker. He no longer painted as a man among men. He painted like a prophet fevered with visions. He would stand in his studio at dawn, whispering, "They come to me in the night. The faces, the forms. If I do not give them birth on canvas, they will devour me." The demon transfigured. Then came The Demon Downcast. It was meant as a sequel, or perhaps a conclusion, to his earlier seated demon. But this new work was unlike anything Russia had ever seen. On the enormous canvas, the demon lies sprawled, crushed beneath the weight of his own wings. His body once proud is twisted. His face, once burning with defiance, now reflects agony, resignation, and a strange, mournful beauty. Around him swirl fragments of gemstone skies, as though the very world had shattered with him. The painting shook Moscow to its core. Critics accused him of obsession, of repeating the same fevered nightmare. But others whispered, "This is not just a painting. This is a prophecy. This is the fall of man, the fall of Russia, the fall of an artist consumed by his own creation." And Vrubel? He gazed at the canvas for hours, sometimes speaking to it as though it were alive. He told his friends, "The demon is me. I painted my own fall." The cracks in reality. By 1902, the cracks in Vrubel's mind could no longer be hidden. He began to suffer hallucinations. He would work endlessly, then suddenly destroy his canvases in fits of despair. He saw faces in the patterns of carpets, angels in the smoke of lamps. His wife, Nadezhda, would often find him pacing the studio, trembling, muttering, "They're watching. They want me to paint faster. I cannot keep up." The birth of their only son brought brief light, but it was a cruel twist of fate. The child was born with a cleft lip and died within 2 years. Vrubel was shattered. Friends said he aged a decade overnight. In his grief, he painted angels with broken wings, mothers holding infants with sorrowful eyes. Each canvas was both prayer and scream. The abyss opens. The final break came during an exhibition in St. Petersburg. Standing before the demon downcast, Vrubel began to retouch the painting obsessively, day after day, adding strokes, changing details as if the figure would never be finished. Visitors whispered that the artist was possessed by the very demon he had created. And perhaps they were right. Soon after, Vrubel suffered a complete collapse. He was admitted to a psychiatric hospital, his mind unraveling into visions and voices. Part 4. Descent into Darkness and the Final Vision. The Hospital Walls. By 1903, Mikhail Vrubel was no longer simply a painter. He had become his paintings. His mind, consumed by visions, collapsed entirely. Friends brought him to a psychiatric clinic in Moscow, where the sterile white walls became both his prison and his last canvas. The doctors spoke in whispers: paranoid psychosis, hallucinations, mania of creativity. But Vrubel refused to let go of his art. Even in confinement, he begged for pencils, scraps of paper, anything. He would draw obsessively, faces, wings, eyes that stared back at him from every corner. One doctor said, "He does not draw as a patient. He draws as if he were documenting another world, one we cannot see." The blind painter. As the years passed, tragedy deepened. His eyesight began to fail, the very sense upon which his genius depended. By 1906 he was nearly blind. Imagine the torment, a man who lived through color and light now trapped in endless night. Yet Vrubel did not despair. Instead he adapted. He would run his fingers across the canvas, tracing shapes, whispering, "I still see them. Inside. The visions never leave." Even in darkness he painted angels, not with eyes but with memory, with inner fire. His final works were fragile, trembling, but filled with an almost unbearable tenderness. They were not visions of demons anymore. They were farewells. The last days. In early 1910, Vrubel was taken to the St. Petersburg Psychiatric Hospital. He was weak, frail, yet strangely calm. His wife Nadezhda visited him often, holding his trembling hands. He would tell her, "I am not afraid. I have seen what lies beyond. It is beautiful and terrible." On the 14th of April, as spring sun broke through the hospital windows, Vrubel asked to be moved closer to the light. He sat silently for hours, his clouded eyes turned upward as though waiting for a final vision. That evening he quietly passed away. Some say that at the moment of his death, the last rays of sun fell upon his face, and for a brief second, it seemed as though he smiled. Legacy of fire. Mikhail Vrubel was only 54 when he died, yet his legacy was eternal. Critics, once bewildered by his madness, now saw him as a prophet. His demons became iconic symbols of the struggle between creation and destruction, between human spirit and its shadows. His art was more than paintings. It was a mirror into the soul's abyss. His canvases shimmered like stained glass, fractured, luminous, tragic. They revealed not the outer world but the storms within. And perhaps that is why Vrubel still haunts us. Because in every line, every wing, every tormented face, we glimpse the eternal truth, that art is not beauty alone. Art is struggle. Art is obsession. Art is the flame that can save, or consume, the one who dares to bear it. The poetic end. If you ever stand before Vrubel's demon downcast, let your eyes wander across the broken wings, the shattered sky, the figure stretched in sorrow. You will feel it, the pulse of a man who gave everything to his vision. And if you listen closely, perhaps you will hear his whisper. The demon is me. The demon is all of us. And though he falls, he never dies.